So good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Diana Wong, and I am the library manager at the Bob Lucas branch of the Altadena Library District. You are all attending a virtual program today, which is part of our From the Garden series. This is a fairly new program series at the library. It's a monthly event that offers a variety of gardening and nature-related talks and workshops that includes like hands-on planting activities and as well as cultural, historical, and health-related presentations by locals, and they're typically held at the Bob Lucas branch location. Today, we are welcoming Yvonne Savio, who grew up on a hillside lot in Pasadena, growing year-round fruits and vegetables and flowers with lots of manure and compost and making do before it was called recycling or repurposing, which is our topic today. And for 36 years, she's worked with the University of California, conferring with statewide vegetable and fruit and ornamental specialists. Then she revitalized the LA County Master Gardening Volunteer Program, teaching over 1,100 master gardeners who then served over 1 million county residents. In 2015, she initiated her website called gardeninginla.net, which is where many of you learned about our event today. So thank you. And if you all have any questions, please put them in the chat box and we will answer them at the end, okay? Thank you so much and welcome, Yvonne.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be making a presentation here very close to home in Altadena. I'm in Pasadena, so I'm literally down the hill from the library. One of the things I wanted to alert you to was my website, gardeninginla.net. And there's quite a few things on there that I hope will be of interest to you, including upcoming gardening events and job opportunities, monthly tips, and my blog, which about every 2 weeks, I literally talk about what's happening in my garden, and with the hopes that there will be some things that will resonate with you in your garden, either that it's happening or it's not happening, and giving you some ideas as to why this is what's going on at this point in the garden's life. There is one adjunct to today's program on recycling that you may want to view, and that is on the menu line, you go to web links, which does have a whole bunch of online links, both for the University of California and also non-university sites that are excellent research sites. They talk and people talk, but it's absolutely science-based information. The third column on that page on the right-hand side is my web appearances. And the very first one on there is when Huell Hauser came to my garden, and we talked about this recycling and reusing, repurposing different tools. So it's a half-an-hour program, and periodically it gets re-shown on our PBS stations here. But this way you'll have it right there at your fingertips so you can go through it. So one other adjunct to the website is if you want to get onto my mailing list to receive announcements of when I put out my blog or news items that I have found of interest or the job opportunities, then on the homepage there is a place where you can, gives my email address, and you can just email me and I'll add you. Also on the homepage is the list by seasons of the main articles that I have put on the blog that were of particular interest, like what is deeping water? watering deeply. What are the cool season problems that can come up and what to do about them? So that's a great one coming up now of appropriate use. So there's by each season, there's a batch of them that there is the link to the blog, and consequently you can get some of that more in-depth information. So let's go ahead with recycling and repurposing. Okay. So repurposing household throwaways into new garden tools. This is a garden up in toward Arleta. All these photos were at community gardens and here in California or on the East Coast or North, and also some of them in England and France, where they're in England, they're called allotment gardens. But the whole point, of course, is to use things that you would have thrown away or would have been for a different use, but you're adopting them and adapting them for use in your garden. So here is the website, gardeninginla.net, and then my email is gardeninginla@gmail.com. So basic resources where you can find items to recycle and repurpose are, of course, anywhere you go. Driving down the street, especially the day before the trash pickup, is an excellent source sometimes, especially for pots. There was one that we walked by and it was this huge, it was about 25 inches across and tall, big red pot that was just beautiful. And so we walked back home, got the car and came and loaded it up after asking the owners if it would be okay if we took it. Now this photograph is here in Hollywood. And it is a property, Waddles, Mr. Waddles, in the 20s. This was his property. And in 1978, the Department of Parks and Recreation had purchased the property and split it into 4 pieces. So it was, in fact, its own repurposing. And the first part that you can't see here, but is to our right and in back of us, is a grove of avocado trees. And these were the first recycled, repurposed use because Mr. Waddles became aware of the batch of them that were in downtown LA and they were going to be ripped up and thrown away. So he appropriated them and planted them on the bottom portion of his property. The second portion of the property is what you see mostly here, which is the plots for the community garden there. And there are about 400, 500 different plots. The third portion of the property is the house and a bit of the rose garden remaining, and also the grassy area around the house. And this is what is still used for weddings and parties and that sort of thing. The fourth portion of the property is in back here, and it's up to Runyon Canyon, and it's the whole wild space that is available to people to walk through and hike and all sort of stuff. So here his property has become 4 different distinct uses. So what we're going to do is go through where you enter a garden, the various garden activities, and ending up with even art in the garden, all with recycled items. So at the garden entrance, on this side, this is a rock wall, which of course is removed rocks from the property and made into a wall. But also one very novel use was that there was a portion of the very center of the top of the wall that was a foot deep, filled with dirt, and then planted with blooming plants. And this garden is in Maine. My husband took the photograph when he was there, but it was just a very nice way of softening the wall. On this side is a garden that is in Boyle Heights, and it is the only communal garden in Los Angeles County. Most gardens are community gardens and have individual plots for people to be able to do their own particular personal gardening. But this garden is a communal garden in that all the activities are done by everybody, and all the benefits of all the food that is created is split amongst the people who do all the work. So here we have a fence. Also, this garden is the one that was really made a point of utilizing local artists. And so this gate down here that you can barely see is wrought iron, and it's all corn, maíz in Spanish. And each one of the sides, this is a driveway going up, and they put individual sections here, little terraces. Each one has a fruit tree in it. And the walls on each side are like this example here. Broken plates that are reassembled in different designs. So it makes a really welcoming entrance to a garden that's open to the public. So pathways, this is at a horticultural school in Berkeley. They've created some beds here. And here they're creating the basis for another bed that will go in the center here. But what they're doing at this point is having removed all the weeds, layering down newspaper. The recommendation is generally about 10 sheets, and overlapping all of the areas, because all the edges, because of course the point here is to suffocate and take away any light that is going to enable whatever roots are left of the weeds to resprout. On top of the paper is the shredded bark and other wood that they get from the property, and putting that to the depth of maybe even 6 inches down there. And then after about a year, all this has broken down and they can go ahead and create that extra bed there without worrying about the weeds having resprouted. Here's some roof tiles that are used as edging for a bed, and this escapee strawberry plant just decided that that was a better place to grow. Here's a whole batch of these little 4-inch pots that line this particular pathway that differentiate between the growing bed and the walking area. Here's several kinds of different materials that are used in this pathway. There's gravel, there's bricks, there's overturned broken pots that are put with the curved side going down so that during the winter, when there is rain, or when there has been rain in the past, as you step on the pot, just the curve, it will literally embed itself into the soil and consequently become a permanent part of it that keeps your feet above the muck of the wet soil. Here, the pathway is lined with just big branches, and even the individual plots here are used then. Here is some stepping stones that were created by the kids at the local elementary school. And here is another selection of different materials used for the pathway. You've got bricks, you've got concrete building blocks, broken concrete here, the wood on the side of the raised beds. So a whole variety of different materials can be used just for separation. Starting seeds and plants. Here's a styrofoam. Now this is the cooler, either the top or the bottom. This may be just the top that's filled with potting mix. On the other hand, it might be the bottom because this says that it's carrots. And of course, carrots, even the short ones, are going to be 5, 6, 7 inches by the time you count the fine base root that goes straight down. So this is a great way to be able to create your own potting mix or your own soil mix for the particular plant that you are growing in that area. And also to be able to control the water itself. You can just water in that space and not have to deal with the dryness out here. Here is those big deli trays. They're using it as a mini greenhouse to cover the top. And you see there's a rock right on top or a brick to hold it down so it doesn't blow all over the place. Here's a turkey tray, what you would bake your Thanksgiving turkey in. And that's a good 3-4 inches deep, which is excellent for starting seeds and mass, and then transplanting them into where they will be growing later. This way you have this very compact area to keep track of in terms of keeping the soil moist and being able to have all those seeds successfully germinate. This is at the Francis Avenue Community Garden, and they have adopted all of these tables, office tables, to use as potting benches. And you see all the 4-inch pots and the 6-packs, all with their labels for the seeds to be started in there. And this is on the east side of this whole grove of fruit trees, so that it gets shaded from the south and from the west. And consequently, it's an excellent area for germination because it's provides the bright light, but not much direct sun, just in the very early morning. Here's using the nursery trays as a bit of shade for the newly planted little plants, the little seedlings, or else just to start as a seed bed. And you'll notice that this is the large holes, which is good for starting seeds from well, from seed, as opposed to the small hold ones, which would be a lot more shade that it would provide. So you can determine which is going to be better for you to use for the success of that particular kind of seed. And this one, maybe an ancient piece of mechanical use that we used to use, was an ironing board. And they've used this as potting bench. And you'll see what the legs are used for later on. Containers. How about a bureau? Bathtub, and of course it has its own drainage hole. Here's a lawn feeder that is now supporting a whole batch of petunias. Boxes, wooden boxes. Watering fountain. An old washer or dryer. Drainage pipes set on their ends and planted with one thing like a chard or lettuce or something. And I don't know how successful it was, but to keep the snails and slugs from crawling up the edge to access the goodies on top. And of course, just a shoe. Raised beds. Now this is literally a raised bed. Bit of a raised concrete piece. The bed frame is placed on top and a fruit tree is growing in the center of it. Now this was in Ridgecrest, which is just south of the Death Valley. And you'll see the whole backyard here is all these beds with fruit trees in them. It was one of those junk to treasures kind of place. Here is another drainage pipe set on its end. And this one is like 3 feet tall. So who knows what this is? Maybe it's a prize parsnip or something. This is back at the Proyecto Jardín in Boyle Heights, the Communal Garden. And this is all the broken concrete that is in the shape of an oval. It's really a spiral because it has an open end on it. And this is all medicinal herbs. And there are folks in the neighborhood who give workshops in how to use medicinal herbs. Of course, the university was not part of that. They will not give instruction that deals with medicines, but this was the gardeners and this is what they wanted, so this is what they created. Here is a good 3 foot tall cordon steel that was left over from a construction project near this particular garden. And so that's what they used at the garden. And this is built on a very steep hillside. So the bottom part of the hillside was, or the bottom part of the raised bed could really support quite a bit of up to 3 feet of growing space for those particular plants. And here a real conjunction of materials from bricks and paving pieces to just plain old mud on top of a wooden base. So general growing techniques that you can use a lot of materials to help you. Here is an upturned pot Now this one's plastic, but you can always, if you can find a metal one, this would be even more effective. What this is doing is enabling this cantaloupe to be off of the ground, and consequently snails and other creepy crawlies that would love to get in touch with a moist fruit to start chewing on, they don't have access. And if you do get the metal can, that would absorb some daily heat and transfer that to the melon every day and shortly into the evening, and consequently help the melon get even sweeter. These are cauliflower plants that have the 5-gallon pot on top to shade it from developing further into its kind of a creaminess. If you've noticed that you don't pick a cauliflower or you are late in picking it from when it's that beautiful white and covered with the leaves, when it starts to open up to the sun, the curd gets kind of creamy colored, beigey. And it doesn't change the flavor at all. It's just that it isn't what people are generally used to. They want a cauliflower to be white, or of course, one of the other colors. So what this technique is providing is that you take those leaves and you cover them, cover the curd all the way up, and then you put the 5-gallon container on top. So that excludes all of the sun, the direct heat sun, and consequently, the globe can grow a little more, but it puts it off like a week or even 2 weeks, so that especially if you started with a 6-pack or more, if you started from seed, then this delays the harvest time, so you don't have quite so many heads to deal with all at once. Of course, you can always just cut them off and give them to your friends. This is celery that has the milk containers. When they were transplanted, the milk container with its top and bottom cut off were placed right on top of the greenery. So what this will accomplish is that as the celery grows and matures and gets longer, all those what we call stalks, that are the petioles, it remains shaded, and consequently it doesn't develop the strong flavor that it will if it's just allowed to have the sun beating on it each day. So it's a sweeter flavor. So here we've got lettuce and spinach that has been transplanted and half size. You know, these larger containers cut in half and put around each of those lettuce or spinach and kind of pressed into the soil a little bit. And consequently, the different creepy crawlies on the soil won't get to it to eat it completely. And here there are juice or water or milk jugs that are on top of other ones for the plants that perhaps need a little more temperature control. It gives a little bit of a greenhouse effect. And even for another hour or so after sunset, there's still a little bit more warmth to them, to the seedlings and the roots. So this might be something that like putting your peas in, and once they start to grow out of the hole, then you know you have to remove the container. Here's tomato plants that have a couple of or what is going on here is that the water jugs, clear jugs, are filled with water. And then on the south side of the plant, they're lined up so that the water will heat up during the day and then radiate some of that heat back into the plant for another hour at sunset. Here's more of the window screening that is used like we did with the nursery trays for starting the seeds. So trellising and support of more vining kinds of things. Here you have the cuttings from fruit trees, the trimmings that are just stuck into bush peas or beans, just to give them a little stability and something to lean up against as they grow up to their 2-3 feet height. Here's bamboo that is put in for pole beans to crawl up. This used to be a clothesline for drying clothes. Now it's a morning glory vine just for sitting underneath. Here is an A-frame that has been built for peas and beans. And the advantage here of having the A-frame and having it maybe even 7 feet tall is that you can walk in here, and because of the angle, the beans or peas will be hanging down. And so consequently, you don't have to rummage through so much of the foliage in order just to find the bean or the pea that you want to pick. And of course, a great advantage of all of these things is the much better air circulation, so that you don't have diseases being able to settle in. Here's my boysenberry plants, and the wires set, the 3 wires set about 1.5 feet apart as it goes up, and my clothespins that very loosely and quickly attach as the vine is growing up. It attaches to this level, and then as it grows up, it goes to the next level and the top level. And then after the top one, which is about 6 feet up, I trim the vine about 6 inches above that top wire. And then all the side shoots are the ones that have the berries that next early summer. And then you trim the whole thing back down in order to have the new growth come up. It's the 2nd year growth that is the one that bears the fruit on the berries. Here is more bamboo that has been set into a teepee for peas or beans or whatever vine. Here is Longwood Gardens back east. This used to be the V made of the trimmings, fruit tree trimmings, that would put hay in there for cattle to be able to reach through and nibble at. Well, this is now supporting the Brussels sprouts, which of course get very tall and lanky. And so this is helping them stay upright. Composting. We're back to our bed frame, 2 of them just tied together and then filled with the various pieces of the greens and dries in order to enable the composting. And then when it's set, you just untie the junction and scoop all that good stuff into the garden. Here's a trash bin that has had lots of drill holes so that it has some air circulation. This one is PVC pipe and slats of wood. You'll see that the netting holds it all in. You'll notice that the front part, it has the leg, but then it also has this shorter piece. Here's the leg, whoops. And here's the shorter piece. And that is what the wood slat fits in between so that it will be that fourth side of the compost. So you can add another one on top as you fill in the compost makings, and then reversing it, start unloading it by removing those from the top down. Now this is one plot that had the big wire tomato cage put in there that they lined with the black plastic and then put all their trimmings into there to create a compost pile right in their very own single plot. However, they punched holes in it and planted plants around it so that the moisture of the compost being created and some of the warmth enabled the plant to burst out and create all of this great blooms on the outside, and consequently really camouflaged the compost pile with beautiful flowers. Watering, definitely an important part of growing your garden plants. So this has 1, 2, 3 modes of watering. The first one is burying a 5-gallon container that has the holes in the bottom, you know, like you would buy a fruit tree or a really large shrub. And you bury that till you have about, it's 3 inches above the soil, because you want to put a lot of mulch around there and you don't want the mulch to be going into the bin. What is in the bottom of the bin is a shovelful of either compost or manure. Because what you're going to do is fill the bin with water, just put your hose in there, and it's going to fill up. It's going to go out through the holes a good 9 inches below the soil surface. But it's also going to be, because the water is saturating the manure or the compost, it's going to be manure tea or compost tea going out to those roots of all of these plants that you've made on top. So these were peas, so it would have been the seeds that I would have planted along here. In the summer, it would be more, I would put maybe 3 squash plants that I had started or purchased at the nursery, plus also more seeds. And that first batch of squash would mature and I would pick it. By the time that those fruits were done harvesting, the seeds that I had also planted when I had transplanted the seedlings, the seeds would now be large enough and start producing. So that way, with one afternoon of planting both seeds and transplants, I ended up having 2 consecutive harvest periods of that squash. So back to the watering method. This soaker hose on either side of that growing area And also, you can't really discern it here, but this is a lower area. It has this berm on the outer edge of this whole growing area. So that I put the hose into here, it fills the bucket, it releases the water and the manure tea out of the base, it overflows this, and it makes a lake here because it is the lower area. So I can let that water run maybe for 10 minutes while I'm off doing something else. And it will have sufficiently watered both from the bottom roots and from the top lake to completely saturate this soil and make it very wonderful for the plants to be able to continue growing. Okay, another method just for watering an individual plant like this tomato. This is on a hillside. So you'll see that this edge on the bottom of the hill is quite tall, maybe 4 inches or so. This whole container is maybe 6-7 inches tall. And the top edge here, it isn't just the way the angle of the photo was taken. This is right by the down at the soil level. So this is going uphill, which means that this gets filled with water, this gets filled with water, and all of that goes down into the soil, absorbing it just as it absorbs, but it completely satisfies this tomato plant. Here is more PVC pipes that have been buried into the soil right by these tomato plants. And this is gone down a good foot or so that the hose goes into the container here, and it literally fills this whole tube up with water, and it gradually waters that entire area, which is a good foot deep. Here is black painted pop bottles filled with water so that they heat up during the day and then exude their heat over the evening to these plants. This is a pitahaya here. Here's another one of the 5-gallon containers that is buried up to its top rim, filled with rock, and then watered in there, filling in all the spaces between the rock. During the day, the rock absorbs the heat, and that warms the water that then goes straight out the bottom holes to these squash or cucumber plants. And so you fill that up once a day or a couple times a week, and that satisfies the plant. So this one does not, or it has only the shovel full of manure tea in it, whereas this is filled with the rock, but they're both serving the same purpose. This, of course, will release more of the water at the root zone than this one will, because this one's filled with the rocks. Now this is at our home up in Davis. I have only one faucet on each side of the house. So what I had to do was put together all these connections, these Y connections, and all these pieces of hoses that would go to the different areas of the garden. Like one of them would go to a 5 by 5 foot space by the front door that had roses in it. This one would go to a 1 foot by 30 foot strip along the fence to the neighbors and the sidewalk that would just be peas growing up the fence. And this one would go to one of the two raised beds that ended in a soaker hose going around the bed itself. So that, and I would adjust each of the Ys to be the amount of flow of water that needed to go to that particular area. So then I would turn the faucet on full bore, and each one of these separate hoses would go to its particular area with the amount of water that it needed. Pest management. Now this person has cut out the bottoms of these gallon plastic containers and planted whatever that is, and shoved the container in so that it was like 2 inches deep and 4 or 5 inches above the surface. And so any of the creepy crawlies in this whole area would not have access to those plants. Here's a toilet paper roll put right on top of where a bean seed was pushed into the soil, so that the foliage would be able to grow up and out of the container without having any creepy crawlies, again, accessing that nice new foliage coming out. Strawberry containers, these little plastic ones that come with so many different kinds of fruits in them. I've used it here so that the lettuce or whatever little plant it is not plucked out of the ground by the birds. Here is window screening or rabbit wire that is put around plants so that the resident critters can't get to the tenderness of the plants. This is out in Pomona at the Regenerative Center. They have one complete bed that has this whole mesh top to it that they put it down overnight and then they put it up again during the daytime. And that really enables all these little plants to get a good start to them until they are so tall that the wire top will crush them if it puts it down, but by that time they are strong enough to be able to withstand most critters, and they're no longer that super tenderness that the critters like. Here are individual containers that the overturned ones are keeping the visual aspect to any munchers that are coming along. They can't tell it's there, but also a container that might have beer in it to attract the slugs and snails to come in and get drowned. Harvesting. Here are potatoes that have been harvested, but you'll notice the green that is on a couple of them here. That means they've been in the sun for too long, the direct sun. And that portion should be cut off. Just keep cutting the surface until you get down to the white portion. And the white is fine to eat, but you do want to remove the green part. And when, of course, it's, once they've been harvested and it's put on this netting, it's a better idea to keep it out of the direct sun so it doesn't begin to develop this green portion. Here's netting that has knots cut in between so that the onions could dry separately. And here's an old colander that I put the leeks and garlic chives seeds into. And this, of course, it has all that chaff that's in there as well, which you don't have to clear out. In fact, I preferred keeping all that, just like with my lettuce seed that I have let go to seed, and it has all the dry matter to it. I keep that, and that's when I scatter the seed, it provides some of that organic matter, that dry organic matter, to help spread out the seed, but also when you're watering it to get them to germinate, that also is a bit of a moist mulch to help it germinate. So tools and storage, this is this is of course a compost bin that is not for compost, but it's for the tall handled tools like your shovels and rakes, and this is the same thing, the tall drainage terracotta that has the handles in it for the tools. Here are the tools that are upright that the gloves are put on the tops to help them dry out by the next time they get used. In my garden, I had so many of these 5-gallon containers that I put two. I have a main pathway that goes up my garden, and then the individual rows go off from that. So at the on each side of that main walkway, I have two bins, one of which is for organic matter that's going to end up in the compost pile, and the other one is for trash that's going to go to the either recycling or the trash pickup. Because what I found was, as I would go down an area and I would either find stuff for either of these two bins, that way I can get rid of it right at the head of that particular pathway. I don't have to end up feeling like I have to take it down to the compost pile or to the main trash bin, which of course I wouldn't do. And then I bring the big bins up that main pathway and I dump each one of these into their respective bins. So here's a file cabinet for storage of stuff. Now, be remembering that this, especially since it's metal, it's going to get really hot during the days. So you can put things in there that is not going to be a problem for the heat, but certainly like seeds, bulbs, you will not want to put in here because they're literally going to bake and become either mush or dried, desiccated out, or in the case of seeds, they're just not going to be able to germinate very well because they're just overdone. Here are tomato cages that have the protective element of corks. So if you're a wine drinker, this is a great way to use all those corks. And here this person has broken pots, the edges that they've put their names on them of those particular herbs so that they know what herb is what flavor. Okay, we've got, whoops, the furniture and fountains. So here's two pots that are on top of one another in reverse order, and a garbage can top that is filled with water, and little clay pieces that are colored to attract the birds. So, and the bees and whoever else needs a bit of moisture in the garden. Here's an old patio table that has the grid top on it so that it offers some nice filtered shade to the plants underneath. Here are pieces of just slats of wood that have been gathered together over a little fountain to make a pretty thing for the garden. And another fountain of pots. Two chairs that have been upholstered with flowers. And here, this is the chives, the onion chives, up at Alice Waters' garden up in at McKinley School in Berkeley. These are the trimmings from the fruit trees that have been woven into a fence around these onion chives. And finally, art in the garden. This is always fun. On a trip we made to, I think it was Michigan, we passed the road department that had these old road signs that somebody had created into flowers. So it was just amazing. I just really wanted to buy one of those to bring them home, because you don't often see such creativity at the road department. Here are two little pots and one big pot that have been glued together and planted in the garden as if it's a frog. Here's a painted rock, bicycle wheels as edging, car parts welded together into a flower statue, a bicycle that is now a topiary, wine bottles as peacock, and tires as a ladybug. Is that cool or what? And that's it. I hope this gives you some great ideas at what you might be throwing out, that you might be able to create something really nice in your own garden.
Thank you, Yvonne, for sharing all your knowledge and experience. We only got one question in the chat, and it was about access to the recording after this. And we will be making it available on the YouTube channel of the library's YouTube channel. And then Yvonne will also be getting a copy, and I think she wanted to post it on her site as well, or making it available. But if anyone has questions now, please feel free and unmute yourself and ask, and you can also turn on your camera.
Hello, this
Hi,
is Mary. So at my school garden where I'm volunteering, we have a really big grass problem. Many types of grass, as a matter of fact. It's not just the Bermuda. I think there's also there's some wiregrass. There's other types of grass, and they come in so sneakily through the edges of the wood and underneath the wood, because it's raised beds. Some have the cloth and some don't. Is there anything I can use, maybe recycle, to keep the grass out of the beds?
Well, there is that weed cloth that has been promoted, various types get developed as we've gone through our gardening experience, and ultimately they don't work, or they work for a while. It's kind of like anything that you're putting out to deter birds. It works for 3 weeks until they figure out that it's not real, and then they go for it. So it's the same kind of thing with the weed barrier cloth. Number one, you have to make sure that you put the correct direction down, otherwise it grows through it. But after several years, it ultimately does anyway. So anytime that you're close to, like, having the grass outside of the raised bed, you can line it, or rather, if your wall is here and the bed is in here, you have to put it on the outside and then the bottom and then the outside of the other wood piece upright, because you don't want to put it on the inside because it's going to crawl through as well. You have to put it on the outside so that it has that barrier as well. But that does mean completely emptying the bed, putting that around, and then refilling it. So it is a huge project, literally heavy and hard work. And that's because you have that source area for all those grasses in the pathways. It's going to be able to come up no matter what. So it's either a repetitive job of cutting around and pulling out, but then that it's going to take a couple years before it's crawling through there again, because you're doing a great job of watering that whole area. So it's making it very attractive to go up into the beds.
Yeah.
So it's like a never-ending process.
I guess it's good for education.
Absolutely. Everything's good for education. And sometimes it's just a matter of there are no good choices, but there are some that are better than others.
Oh, I do have one other question. We seem to have a lot of gnats and maybe mosquitoes in the garden. I was wondering, are there plants that we can plant to detract those?
No, but what you need to do is stop watering so much, because it's the soil surface that is remaining moist, which is where everybody puts their eggs. And so you get the constant the whole cycle. You get the eggs, they develop, they set more eggs in there, and the whole thing, the cycle keeps going. So don't water until the top surface of 1 inch is dry to the touch. Okay. And then that is over several weeks' time and several generations. That is what will prevent more of those, of the eggs being laid in there. Now, some people have, some recommendations have been to use chamomile tea, and planting citronella, but it's really, you're causing the problem by keeping the soil surface so moist. Now, in houseplants, some of the recommendations are to put a level of gravel on top so that that part dries completely and the gnats can't set their eggs into the dry gravel. But in a garden, you don't want to start adding gravel to everything, because then it just destroys the texture of the soil and, you know, makes it hard to plant anything because you keep hitting these pieces of gravel. So it's really the top soil surface being too moist constantly that is the issue. And then once it's dry, you know, scratch it back and forth, kind of cultivating it in order to bring more of the moisture to the surface. I mean, you know, like an inch deep, just the part that is the dry part, and let that dry completely. So, you know, now might be a good time, since you're finished with summer stuff and before you plant cool season stuff, have it dry completely out, so that you have maybe a month, you know, you have 3 separate week-long cycles to get rid of all of those gnats, to go somewhere else, because this is no longer hospitable for them to grow and set their eggs.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just not easy, especially in a kid's garden, because everybody wants to be out there watering their plants, you know.
Well, there's other problems too, like old sprinkler systems that I have no control over.
Yeah.
But I can at least, armed with this knowledge, work on it.
Yeah. You know that the problem is that it's too moist, so just go for that. You know, you might get plastic and just cover the beds so that it will not, that's up a little bit, so it will evaporate, but it won't, the new broken water system will not keep flooding the bed.
We have time for more questions.
Did we have any from the chat itself?
It was just that one question about the recording of this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I guess if there's no more questions, we can all turn on our video and wave bye to each other if you like. And then I'll also end the recording now. Thank you for attending, and we will have Ms. Savio back again in the future.
And if, you know, when something occurs to you, just email me.
Got it.
I love chatting gardening. So,
Thank you so much.
all righty. Bye.